Hey there, I'm Zach Abramowitz, and I am Legally Disrupted. On episode 38 of Zach Abramowitz's Legally Disrupted, I have the very talented Scott Stevenson. He is the CEO of Spellbook. He is one of the most dynamic founders in the industry. He is widely followed on X and LinkedIn and other places. And Spellbook is one of the fastest growing legal technology companies in history. And it has a very unique growth trajectory. And Scott has a very contrarian take on this market in general. I was able to get into it with Scott about some really hot topics, including Claude's announcement last week that they are entering the legal space, specifically with a contract review tool, highly relevant for a company like Spellbook that is totally focused on AI and contracts. And we also got a chance to talk about the recent Harry Stebbings podcast where he interviewed Winston Weinberg from Harvey and Max Junstrand from Legora, giving the impression that legal AI is perhaps a two-horse race. We challenge that narrative. So, without further ado, let's go deeper with Scott. Let's get disrupted. So you were asking me pre-production, or our production meeting rather, if about investing in Sandstone. And I feel like I've been terrible about this because we've been like underwater with like with onboarding new clients and engagements. But I wanted to write a piece about like why I went back to investing in startups. And like my perspective on this right now is there's huge, I think is like we saw this week with like Claude Cowork, there's like huge risk in investing in startups like since ChatGPT, emerged and since large language models have, become normalized, or ubiquitous. I've always felt there's like a major question around Moat, and will the foundation models do this? And will software, coding get so inexpensive that people no longer buy software, they just make their own, bespoke. And I think all of those like structural risks still exist. But at the same time, I have to like line that up with the other truth, which is that there has never been a time in history when so many talented entrepreneurs are trying to start AI businesses or tech businesses focused on legal and professional services. And this is something that like I heard last year, and it was one, I think to me, one of the quotes of the year on my podcast, at least, Jonathan Levy from Y Combinator. And, they funded some of the best, some of the best legal tech companies on the planet. And I said to them, like, so you guys are investing in legal more now, that large language models are here. And he said, not because we've like decided like we're going to bet on this vertical. He said, really what it comes down to is we are a talent business and we just invest in top tier teams. And there has never been this many top tier one founding teams that are building companies in the legal profession, around the legal profession. And that's why, we're doing it. And I think that is the case. And so my feeling is I've got big FOMO over missing out on some of the first, wave of companies, of which Spellbook is absolutely one. And you've seen my presentations. So you know that the Spellbook, we're going to get into this, like fits into like a bunch of like my like theses, like about like market adoption of AI. But my feeling now is if I see a top team that's building in the space, then I need to at least hedge, because if 5-10 years from now, I was in the midst of this, was meeting all the top companies and all the top teams, and got so cute where I was like, oh, I'm not sure like startup and VC, that model really still makes sense anymore. And maybe it's a relic of the past. I feel like I'm going to be where I am right now, which is like a couple of years ago when I thought about buying real estate in San Francisco and in New York, because they were both like experiencing like downturns. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe everything's going to go remote. And it's like, no, it's not. Right. So I feel the risk. I definitely feel the risk of like investing in startups, but I also feel like there's some really smart people. They've looked at this, they understand the risks, and I have to at least like, hedge somewhat human. So that, but I haven't gotten to like put all that into a newsletter and send it out yet. But that's the That's my thinking. That's a great way to start off an interview with you, Scott, is to like just talk all about myself.
No, I think it's a very interesting place to start. I love thinking about investing, bet making, and like where the alpha lies. Like that's how we run our company as well in terms of deciding what we're going to build and when we're going to build it. I think one of the hardest things to figure out in legal tech and with really any kind of momentum investing when there is this much momentum is like, is this thing overhyped? Is it over competitive or is it underhyped? And that's the hard question. It's not, is legal AI good or bad? Is it at the right price? Is there too much competition? Is there too little? The argument I've thought a lot about this. I think that the size of the opportunity is still, somewhat underpriced. And I think the reason for it is, the way I think about it is, starting in like the 80s, we started to get spreadsheets and databases, and we started to automate all of the quantitative and structured data problems in the world, like, CRMs like Salesforce and financial software spreadsheets. Jack Newton from Clio talks about how like it used to take a building full of people to run a financial model, and now one person with a spreadsheet can run a financial model. Like that's a massive change that happened, and that took decades. So over decades, databases and spreadsheets, basically created this software and database computing industry, and automated so much of the world and created so much value. Starting in the 80s, right up to today. So that's like 40 years of value creation that has happened in the software industry. However, like legal work was largely immune to this because lawyers deal with unstructured text, and computers just up until great LLMs, like computers were not good at reading unstructured text or outputting it. Computers could only deal with like quantitative and structured data. And so for me, like why this is happening, it's like a dam broke. It's like there was all this pent up demand for legal efficiency and legal software, over like 40 years, because computers just couldn't help lawyers that much. And now all of a sudden, starting in 2022 with GPT-3, a software can help lawyers in so many ways. So you're seeing like 40 years of pent up demand. Like now we're on, I guess we're on year 4. This is year 4. So it's like 40 years, of pent up demand in the legal industry, kind of, the dam breaking and now getting kind of like serviced in 4 years. It's just like, it's a crazy amount of value and efficiency like being created very, very quickly. And I don't think we've seen anything like it, before. So I think it's wise. I think it's still wise to invest. I think, there's still a lot of upside left. I think there's going to be a lot of big winners, in different parts of the legal vertical. Yeah.
So I think about this quite a bit. I am for sure. I totally agree with you. It's not just that it's correctly priced, it's underpriced. And I think that part of the reason we're underpricing it is we're comparing it. You talked about the pent up demand. I think part of the issue is we're comparing it to previous categories of software. And we're saying, well, like if Salesforce or like the database companies, as I think about them, are doing this amount of revenue and they're at this multiple, like how can you possibly, and here's my thinking on this. And I've heard different versions of this. I'll start with the version that I've heard that I don't entirely agree with, and then like the version of that I really do. So the version I don't necessarily agree with, I heard from Ev Randall, who's a partner at Benchmark. He was at Founders Fund, and he articulated this beautifully. He said, "Listen, the margins are like totally, you can't compare them to previous software because previous software did not have as much value. It did not actually automate." Now, this is his formulation. It didn't actually automate what like the person could do, and to replace that role is so much more valuable that that comparing it to like a database technology like a CRM or a Workday or a contract lifecycle management, whatever it is, it's the wrong comparison. So my preferred version of that is a little bit different even.
Sure.
And I was thinking about this and I want to get to these interviews, but I was just listening to the Winston Weinberg, Harvey's founder on 20 VC, and they asked him, what would you rather invest in? Anthropic, maybe at 500 million, or OpenAI or 500 billion, or OpenAI at 750 billion. And I actually really agreed with his answer. He said, I'd like to invest in both.
You said both. Yeah.
Both. And I
agree too.
Completely agree. I think they're both undervalued. And this gets to my point. What I think this AI software does, and it's just my experience, I just look at what it's done for me versus what database technology did for me, and the unlock has been unreal. And it's not just that it does what I do. It gives me superpowers that I never had before. And I think that we don't fully understand how valuable intelligence is. And I think that in professional services in particular, it's really deeply in demand. And another company I've flagged on a slide with Spellbook is TrialKit. And one of the things that fascinates me about TrialKit is that it's selling to criminal defense attorneys, right? Criminal defense attorneys were not traditionally big buyers of technology, not even case management. The technology stack of a criminal defense attorney is a Facebook account, an email account, and a camera, right? That's not there's not it is not someone who is traditionally buying FileVine, right? Or any case management system. But all of a sudden, what AI can do for a criminal defense attorney is essentially the difference between whether or not they abide by their professional responsibility or don't. Yeah. It's now giving them unlocking superpowers they didn't have. And I think that this is going to be what people look back on and go that's why all of this actually made sense. I think another company in the space that I've followed is a company called Learned Hand, that's building AI specifically for courts and judges and clerks, right? And there have been companies like Tyler Technologies that have sold to courts beforehand, but they didn't sell intelligence. And in the court system, intelligence is in high demand. And not to say anything not nice about the judges and the clerks, but there's not enough supply. We know this because they don't have enough clerks. They're the bottleneck and the lag of the courts sort of proves the point. It's not functioning the way it's supposed to because there's not enough intelligence to power the system. And when people realize, hold on a second, there's another way to power intelligence besides just throwing human bodies at it. And my humans can become superhumans with AI, and there's that full recognition. I think all these multiples are going to make tons of sense, which I think should work out pretty nicely for Spellbook.
I think so. I hope so. I think it'll work out well for many of us. I think the other thing that's underestimated and undervalued, the thing I think a lot about, is that, I think people have the sense that, we're going to need more breakthroughs for these tools to become really useful.
It's the opposite.
And what we're seeing is no, actually, there's actually only a couple small little engineering things that need to be figured out. The big challenge with AI products now is, you put in a prompt and, maybe it works for 2 minutes or maybe 30 minutes if you're using a really complicated agent, and then you get a result back. It's this, and people are like, okay, that's kind of cool, but it's not totally changing the world. But I think people are underestimating what's going to happen when these agents are just kind of always running in the background, when they're scheduled to run every day or every hour, when they're messaging you proactively, which I think is part of the Sandstone thesis, when they're actually messaging you proactively, to say, hey, I need help on blocking this. And they're actually, chipping away at your problems in life while you're sleeping and while you're out, skiing or something like that. I don't think people understand that, that's not a research leap we need to make, to have agents that are okay. The other analogy I'll use is imagine you have an employee. Imagine you have an employee where the employee only does work when you prompt them, and then they'll work for 2 minutes when you prompt them, and then they stop. How many of those employees would you hire? Where you literally have to go to all their desks, tell them what to do. They'll work for 2 minutes and then they'll stop. you wouldn't hire that many of those employees. But what if all of a sudden there's just a little tweak you need to make where now those employees are actually going to be working, an 8-hour workday on their own and figure out what they have to do next and proactively reach out to you when they need input.
Initiative.
Take initiative. Yeah. I mean, that's not a research leap we need. It's literally, we just need better scheduling systems and, maybe like a little bit better long-term planning, which there's some really good metrics that I think came out today from like ChatGPT's 5.2 benchmarks on like its ability to do like a 6-hour coding task. Maybe we need a little bit better, planning, but like largely it's scheduling. Like one of the things I've started using is, I don't know if you've tried Twin. Have you seen this thing, twin.so?
No.
It's this really cool, like generic agent builder. And it does a really good job of scheduling and like helping push things out. So I'm like, there's this agent I use every day. I'm like, look at everyone I'm meeting with today. So you would have been on there and like research them and just tell me about them and send that to me in Slack every morning. And that's what it does, and I don't have to touch it. It's done automatically. I think people really underestimate, it's going to be like a 10x going from, these AI coworkers who work for 2 minutes when you prompt them to AI coworkers who are always working in the background. I think it's like two different universes.
It's funny that you mentioned that because one of the tools that I've set up for myself, and some of this, a lot of times I'm like, I want to vibe code this, and I'm like, oh, actually, you could just do this like in the Frontier model. You don't actually need to vibe code this. But I've continued to set up like a task agent, and what the task does every single day, twice a day, is it combs for certain announcements from certain firms that I know are like competitor firms to clients of ours. And I know that those clients will always get questions about AI initiatives undertaken by those competitor firms. So like, in other words, if I'm like at, Skadden and Walktel like announces an AI initiative, I know that like I'm going to get questions internally like, hey, did anyone know what what they're doing? And what's this use case about? What's this company they partnered with? So I proactively have that because I know typically those questions will come to us. And I know in advance that they're coming. Now, why is this, like you could theoretically have done something like this with a Google search, but it would have been very, very tricky. So the way that, I would have had to do this would basically go and read every single day, law.com, artificial lawyer, law 3, any one of the sites that might announce it, comb through Twitter, comb through, go to the law firm's websites, go to the websites of each of the primary like tech companies themselves and see, like, has something been announced? But with a task, but by setting up like a task, an AI task to do that you can run twice a day. And like, that's like one of those examples again of like, not where I'm able to like do the thing that I used to, but now I can do it faster. This is like, I wouldn't have even thought to do this because it would be so like impractical to run through that cycle every single day. But now that like I've got AI and it can do it and it's doing it twice a day for me. I could theoretically set it up to run every hour. It would be the same. It's just like, I don't need all the notifications. Like, no new stuff. Don't worry.
Yeah. This is going to be my next agent. Yeah. I need that in Slack, just the daily news digest. So I don't get, sucked into social media too deep and I can just get the cream of the crop, the announcements. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because like I saw something, I think it was on X in the last week or so, someone saying that the sweet spot is just to be like very early and directionally accurate. And I think that directionally accurate is not something that a lot of like lawyers, law firms, and people who are maybe like not paying like very close attention to AI understand, because I think that like, and I want to take this back to another point you made, but I think that like it's so key to understand, okay, the train is moving very fast and we got to sort of plan for where we assume it's going. And I think 3 years ago, if you mistook an exponential advance for an incremental advance, you did yourself a major disservice, because it just became very hard for you to believe that this is going to amount to anything. It was like, oh, what's the use case of a large language model, and why is this such a big deal? And it hallucinates, and like if you were on the other side of this and you're like, did we just create a sentient reasoning being? Like, this is a really big, if we did that, that's a really big deal, and this is going to be a big deal, and this is going to have like lots of downstream effects that I can't possibly predict in my brain today. Now, you said before, like, people are like waiting for like breakthroughs, and I actually think it's the opposite. I feel like the lack, like when we hit like model plateau, I actually think we might see adoption go up, because I know, talking to a lot of buyers, that one of their questions is always like, well, wait, should we buy the product? Because maybe in 6 months from now, AI is going to develop so quick. And I think that if we had a slowdown in process, we might actually see like an uptick in adoption and less analysis paralysis.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah, there's a couple really interesting points there. I wrote this, I can't remember if you read this, but yeah, I have this blog post called, it's time to chop wood with a blunt axe. And it talks about how, there's the Abe Lincoln quote of, I don't know, if I had like 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend like 5 hours sharpening the axe or something like that. And our attitude, as innovators, I think that the attitude for the early adopters has to be like, there's no time to sharpen your axe and to master anything right now. Just pick up the axe today, and then the chainsaw is going to come up tomorrow, and then drop the axe, pick up the chainsaw, and then the laser chainsaw is going to come out after that. There's no time to just master any of these tools. If you want to be on the leading edge, I think you have to become very proficient at picking up one thing and then dropping it and picking up the next thing, and being comfortable with the fact that, you may not be able to do like a 10-part lecture series to master one tool, because there's not even time for anyone to write that lecture series before, the next thing comes out. But I think you're right that, the majority of the market is not comfortable with swapping their tools every 6 months. So yeah, it's a good thesis that once we get that stability, then there is time to write, the 10-part lecture series on, how to do contract review with AI. And there's more education. Maybe you do see adoption uptick at that point.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you've got that. That I am familiar with the post, because my partner Nina flagged it for me. And one of the things that she always notes about Spellbook, and that I think is like very evident, you follow you guys. You guys ship like crazy. And I wonder like how much that like that axe thesis or that insight is behind like your like sort of relentless ability to constantly ship.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I mean, I think, we launched in summer of 2022. And I think when we launched the product and saw success with it and saw how the product worked and how people used it, very early on, our engineering and product team was like, this way of building software is very, very different. The way it's non-deterministic, it's kind of, you have to mold it and massage it. It's a very different type of software to build. And we were very early on, we're like, we need to build a different culture for this moment. Like the software culture from 5 years ago is just not going to be able to keep up because it's designed for a different pace, a different type of software, and so on. I think what you mentioned about being directionally correct is a huge part of our culture. Is like, I think both engineers and lawyers have this obsession with being precisely correct about things, and they get very uncomfortable with things that are kind of vaguely sort of maybe correct. But when we thought about our product strategy, about how we're building, about how the product's going to work, I think we just gained a lot of comfort with, we don't know what the future is going to look like. No one does. No one knows what the end state of these products is going to be. But we know that if we go in this direction really fast, like we're going to end up in a good position. And and that's what it came down to for us is being comfortable with the unknown, being comfortable with the fact that, we can't design the perfect end state of Spellbook because no one knows exactly where this technology is going, and encouraging our team to just keep moving forward. I think we also designed our UI in a way where everything's a suggestion. Everything in Spellbook is like, hey, maybe you could do this, but we're not doing stuff for you in a way that, feels irresponsible. So that allows us to experiment more. Because we're only providing suggestions to our users, it allows us to worry less about, like, in the actual user experience being like objectively precise on every little thing, and instead worry about, well, how do we bubble up good suggestions to lawyers that they can review themselves? Yeah. And that allows us to move pretty quickly. Yeah.
From an engineering perspective, like one of the things that I've heard in talking to a lot of startups is a tension between how to balance your AI team with like your traditional software engineers, and that there's still very important roles for both. Like, what have you found is like the right balance and the right relationship?
To be honest, I don't even see it as two teams anymore. I see it as like, the way we see it is like there's a new culture and a new type of person that you need. I think, and I think it's not the old AI culture, and it's not the old software engineering culture. It's an actual new thing that we try to cultivate on our team. Because the difference is you have to be more creative and artistic in dealing with these models because they're non-deterministic. There's no such thing as a correct contract review. If you give a contract to two great lawyers, they will both give you back different answers. And right. It's not necessarily saying that either of those lawyers is wrong or one model is better than the other. It's inherently subjective. And so getting engineers, and technical people to get comfortable with that subjectivity is very difficult. And even for the AI engineers, a lot of the AI R&D engineers used to work before LLMs used to work on these problems where like there was a very objective metric. Like maybe you're trying to.
Isn't this the whole reason, like all the way everyone they always went into math in the first place? Is there's right. one answer.
Exactly.
If you're into liberal arts, you're okay with like multiple answers. Mm-hmm. It's like now the engineers have two answers, or three, or four, or five.
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's difficult for actually both the traditional AI teams and the engineering, because like the traditional AI teams would be like, let's build a model that like identifies cats and cows and trees, and you can say, okay, did it identify a cat? Or did it not? And you can say how accurate it is. But when you get into something as subjective as like 100-page contract review and like what terms you should push back on, it's just incredibly subjective. So I think, we think of these people as like, we do just call them, AI engineers, but I think it's a new set of skills that involves this technical knowledge, but also this sort of like artistry of like subjectively figuring out like what feels good. And there's a lot of obsession from, especially from AI engineers on evals. So evals is like, mathematically measuring how good, one approach is versus the other. And I think that's really important for us and for every company, and like long-term understanding of like, is your product getting better or is it getting worse? But when you're building these features for the first time, to be honest, I think the best method is like get an AI engineer and a lawyer to sit down and play with different models and techniques and algorithms, and just look at the outputs and be like, does this feel good or does this not feel good? And it's so hard to get engineers to feel that way. It's so hard to get lawyers to see that way. It's like, does it feel good? But at the same time, if you were to give work to a lawyer and that lawyer gave work back to you, that's what you would do. You would say, did that lawyer do good work or did they not? You would subjectively evaluate.
Like, what about humans?
Yeah. So, we're technical folks are very uncomfortable with like this idea of subjective evaluation of things. But the truth is you do it all the time. I mean, management, hiring, firing, is a very fluffy art. There's no objective right way to go about managing and doing performance evaluations. In fact, it's the same problem. Like, our team is 140 people now. And, we have to scale up performance evaluations, and everyone will always say, oh, you need like this really objective framework to say, whether every all of those 140 people are performing well or not. And people try to come up with these, performance evaluation matrices where
weighting
weighting
scoring,
and everyone gets this objective score, but everyone knows deep down that like it's all kind of bullshit, and that there's this subjective layer on top of all of that is really, really hard to capture. And so I think that, it's a new breed of new kind of combined skill set you need to build these products well.
One of the things I highlight, or I've been highlighting in talks over the last 6 months, is the fact that AI at its core, if you think about the growth of AI, it's always been consumer, user, employee led rather than employer or institutional led, right? In other words, it's always been that the individual people are the ones who tend to get like the most value out of AI before their company might, right? And like, we were talking about SaaS beforehand, and companies like Salesforce, where like I think the most salespeople would probably tell you the value of Salesforce is not to like us as like account execs. Like we can't stand putting in like our notes,
sure,
but it's to the director of sales who gets to like see the insights. But it's effectively built for the company as opposed to AI, which has really been more similar to like social media or the iPhone.
Yeah,
consumer and user led. What's interesting about Spellbook is that you're the first example I can really remember of a company that felt like it grew in that way, like social media ads and selling direct to smaller firms and solos, where you're selling to the lawyer themselves, as opposed to like, in big law, where you're selling maybe to a chief innovation officer who's buying on behalf of a practice group, who's buying on behalf of attorneys, and have to make sure the attorneys are using it. With you guys, you just like, no, I know they're going to use it because they bought it themselves. Can you talk about like that dynamic and how you guys have like, have you leaned into that? Like, at what point did you sort of realize like, oh yeah, we're like selling to like the user. The user is the buyer, and it's not always really been the case in legal.
Yeah. No, many investors have told us that our approach to the market has been unique and that they haven't seen it too often. But and maybe it is more possible now with AI, because now we're actually building tools that are actually useful for the individual lawyers. But the reason we did it initially is because we thought it would build a better product. We had dealt with innovation teams at Big Law before, and the procurement process there. And, I just wasn't convinced that was the best way to build the best product. Because you end up with this huge laundry list of like, you have 12 people, like all the partners of the firm or senior partners, like, on this committee saying like, oh, we need to do innovation, and you kind of have this decision by committee, and you end up with this laundry list of, okay, we need a product that does these like 50 things. And, and they're like, can you do it? And and I think that results in very poor products.
I'm going to give you a very specific example. And this is my conjecture. I don't know anything like on the inside. I think that a great example of that is a feature that both Harvey and Legora have built, which is their like client portal.
Client portal. Yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly how this went down. I know exactly how this went down. What happened, and this is not having been in the conversations, but I'm sure the lawyers were like, what we need? We need a place. And I'm like, I don't think anyone needs this, but I'm sure that both companies have heard it from their customers who are convinced they needed it. And I don't think you guys have a similar product. And my guess is because you're actually dealing with the user. And I don't think any lawyer has ever really benefited from having this like client portal that their clients could log into.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And that, I knew you were going to say that. And I thought the exact same thing. And we, before we launched Spellbook in 2022, we did have another product set, and we did sell to the innovation committee buyer more often, and we're a little bit more siloed for a period of time. And we actually did at one point build a client portal for our previous product, Rally, and we rolled it out to all these firms. They were so excited to buy it. It was exactly what they wanted. And, kind of the thing that we realized, like, why do they want it is because the main value for some of these really big firms to roll out AI is to show their client that they're using AI. That is the thing. It's like the press release, the showing like, oh, we're using X. We're an innovative law firm. Like that is like a lot of the value for them. And they want to be able to, if they can't show the AI to the client, what's the value in it? They're just having less billable hours. You know what I mean? Yeah, we built this client portal and we rolled it out, sold it to some firms, and the usage was terrible. Like clients didn't like it. Clients were like, "What the hell? Like, I just want to use email. Why can't I?" Like, the feedback we would end up hearing from the clients is like, "I just want to email my lawyer. Like, why do I have to log into a web portal? Why can't I email my lawyer like I email everyone else? Like this isn't actually very convenient at all." So. Yeah,
yep.
I agree.
But to your point is like when you're catering to the user and the user is the buyer and they have these aligned incentives, that's where you get this like amazing feedback on product. Number one, like evals, like who needs evals? Just like check if people are using it. Right, that will tell you if like if your product's working. Did someone come back and say like, "Hey, I got screwed because I recommended something to my client"? Like, if you're not hearing that, if you're hearing like, "Wow, this is fabulous. Can we get more subscriptions to the firm?" Like, there's your evals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other thing we look at for like our contract review product is just suggestion acceptance rate. Like we can do all the evals internally that we want, but what we look at is how many of the suggestions that we suggest get accepted by a lawyer. When we first launched Spellbook's contract review, 5% of our suggestions were accepted by lawyers. And then we improved it and just kind of got feedback, made, use better models, use better techniques, added memory, preference learning. And now we're between 50 and 60% of the suggestions we provide are accepted by a lawyer. So that's like an incredible, North Star for us that, again, if you just tie yourself to the user and see how they're actually using the product, I think it magnetizes you in the right direction. So yeah, that's why we have sold the product that way. We do bigger enterprise deals now, more on the in-house side than the law firm side. And, but still, I think those organizations are much more focused on utility. And they don't have this secondary motive of like, how do I show my client that I'm using AI? Like, if, eBay, one of our customers, is not adopting Spellbook because they want to show their customers that they're using Spellbook. They have this kind of very pure utilitarian need of, dealing with their contract flow.
So I want to ask you about something, and this is like a personal question, but I was feeling it the other day because I know Harry Stebbings had Winston Weinberg, and then he had Max Junstrand, so Harvey and Legora. And first of all, I love the 20 VC podcast so much that I think I would start talking about doing like a more regular newsletter in which I would include like, hey, best content I've seen this week. But I think I was talking about changing it to like best like content in the 20 VC podcast this week. I mean, that I really think it is like, if you just like want to like keep up more or less with like where AI is headed as an industry, if you're listening to one or two of those podcasts a week, like you're doing great. Yeah. And so I love the pod, but I think that the way that he positioned it was that like, I've got like, this is like a 2-horse race, and here's like horse number 1 and here's horse number 2. And they hate each other and what. And I noticed that you wrote like, this is not necessarily a 2-horse race, and I actually felt the same way. Like, so let me ask you, like, is legal AI a 2-horse race?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think those companies in particular are going very head to head in big law. So in that particular fraction of the world of like, a full service platform that kind of does everything that a big law firm would need. Maybe. But I still think it's very much too early to call any winners.
And I mean, you guys have had crazy growth. You've got top flight VCs who've invested with you. Keith Boy who's invested. I felt like they've
invested for a reason. Yeah. I would say, there's us and a number of other companies who've done extraordinarily well. Like we actually, I think we may have more customers than both of those companies combined. We've launched before both of them. I respect them greatly. I watched both the episodes. I think, Max and Winston are very smart, formidable founders. And to be honest, it's such a blue ocean that we don't run into those products hardly at all when we are out in the market. We really don't. So it doesn't feel that competitive to us. And we have carved this very different niche. And I think there's so many different niches in law. Like we're about contracts. And contracts, their brand is very much about selling to lawyers, law firms. Now they're going into in-house, but still very much around the lawyer. Where we're really deeply focused on contracts. We say we're like a toaster for contracts. Like we do the thing we do really, really well. And, if you think about, the number of users out there, I think the most aggressive estimate I've seen on the number of lawyers in the world, which is probably an overestimate, is at 20 million. But like how many people actually touch contracts? Sales teams, procurement teams, HR teams, corporate admins, that the number of people there is much larger. So I think, we're still only scratching the surface on these markets. And, I think, the in-house market in particular, it's just gigantic. There are so many, every company is dealing with legal matters all the time, and there's no clear winners in that segment. And there's small businesses, mid-sized businesses, Fortune 100 companies, there's all these there's litigation, and then there's contracts, and then there's intellectual property. I mean, there's so many different areas to conquer. And I think Legora and Harvey have taken a very kind of broad platform approach, which someone needs to do. But the interface is more generalized. And I think there's a lot of areas where we need more toasters and kettles, like products that do certain things really, really well and deeply. So I think there, short answer is, I think there will be, many more horses doing well. And it's not even a race, to be honest. It's like the whole idea that it's a race. In a race, there's only one winner. But it's, I really think that these areas of law are so different, and the customers are so different, that there's going to be multiple gold medals awarded.
And there's also like the where the puck is going, right? Because you mentioned before, integrating AI into a large law firm is complicated. The reason I know this is because I have multiple customers right now who are large law firms who have even bought one of the tools, right? Broadly speaking. And as it turns out, like, I think there was a sort of a suspicion is that like, all right, we're good. We bought one. And then like a year later, there's like, okay, I think there's some more work to do here. Meaning, and I think that like that it's not a simple space to sell into. And in some ways, it's like the human equivalent of the problem that SaaS companies are having with bolting on AI. Like adding AI into a mega firm is in many ways a kind of bolt on, not a redesign. And the way it's being done right now, what occurs to me and what I've been like flagging and tracking in every conversation I have with every attorney that I speak to at a big firm is, have you considered that it might be like financially advantageous for you, not work-life balance, financially advantageous for you to leave, start your own practice or smaller practice now, AI first? And do maybe the tools exist out there right now that enable you to do that? Yeah, the reason I say that is it feels to me like one of the products. If I'm leaving, if I'm coming from a transactional practice, and I'm now going to go out and start my own firm, I'm getting a Spellbook license right away. Are you seeing that trend play out yet? Is that something that you guys have thought about? Like what
massively. Yeah.
Okay, because this feels to me like the single biggest opportunity, in this space right now is this entire new like group of firms that could be coming that don't need their own tech. That like, hey, the tech is out there. I just need to go and start my own practice now.
Yeah, no, we see it all the time. Small law was where we started, and so we see a lot of solos starting their own firms or just boutique firms cropping up. With lawyers, making sometimes more money and having better work-life balance than they ever did before. And partially they're servicing these new types of clients sometimes that were maybe more cost sensitive and that were difficult to service before. Like, I mean, this is just one model. But there's so many people out there who need legal help and so many businesses, where, they previously struggled to afford it, but now with AI, if you run your practice really efficiently, you can service that segment of the market and have like just glut of work. And we have a lot of lawyers who have started smaller practices, left big law, or mid law and started their own thing with AI. I think the challenge of doing that previously, or one of the challenges, was just what you do if you get a bunch of work at once, or where does the overflow go when you have overflow. Or you have, just a lot of monotonous drafting work to do. But now that, AI can take care of so much of that. It's much more feasible. So yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of success there. We're seeing a lot of success with in-house. And I think like in-house teams are going to start pulling some of the work back in-house.
Oh, for sure. That's happening.
That they were, pushing to, ALSPs or to big law. And yeah, I think big law is probably in the most difficult position of figuring out their whole business model of billing by the hour and how to keep those in-house clients, how to compete with these scrappy small firms. I'm sure the most innovative big law client firms will figure it out for sure, because there will always be this demand for kind of these big brand firms to deal with like these complex surgical transactions. But I think they're in the most challenging position.
Yeah, it makes you wonder because like you take a company like Accenture, right? And Accenture did last year like $9 billion in AI bookings, increased revenue, and yet like down 30%, last year. I think the market is looking at them and going like, how is Accenture, like the body shop of body shops, going to make it in like an age of AI? Yeah. And that's when like Accenture is doing exceptionally well from AI. And it made me think like, what would happen if any of these law firms were publicly traded? How would the market be like reacting to them right now? Would they be getting that Accenture treatment? I want your reaction to that, but then I want to like segue that into like the big news this week. Claude Cowork announcing this contract review tool, and the whole like there have been some fairly crazy market freakouts since like AI. So you have like Klarna tweeting that like they're hiring, they've got an AI agent taking care of customer success. Teleperformance at the exact moment of that tweet loses $1 billion in value that they haven't regained. DocuGPT, DocuSign, so this tool that like OpenAI is like using like as their internal finance tool that they like, coded up, and now the DocuSign loses 10% of its value on that single day. And you have like the MIT study coming out, and like NVIDIA, like, so you have like, we've had like a fair number of market freakouts. This one feels like the freakout of freakouts to me. And I'm like, did they not like already know that like legacy SaaS and incumbents were in trouble? It seems kind of weird that this, of all things, like created this like, sort of panic in the market. But like, obviously you're like in the contract review space. Like, what's your take on this? And like, should we be going and buying up like SaaS stocks right now?
Yeah, I have a couple of big thoughts on this. Like, one, should I start with the simple one or the esoteric one first?
Ooh, esoteric.
should I start with the esoteric? Okay, my esoteric point is like
everyone else would have said simple. I quickly jumped on esoteric.
Okay, yeah. I'm always, all these podcasts, I'm always like, should I go down the rabbit hole or not? Like, you've probably seen this on my like X account, but like, and maybe it's not that esoteric. I do think public markets are like somewhat broken at the moment. And my view, somewhat contrary take, but not that contrary, is that like passive investing is like radically distorting public markets and how the biggest caps just end up absorbing more and more capital. You have like probably over half of millennials, and that's my generation. I don't know what your generation is.
Yeah, I'm that's
millennial. Yeah, you're millennial.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 43. I'm 1982, okay. So not exactly millennial, but like
sure. Anyway, so you have half of millennials putting every paycheck into like S&P 500 index funds. This was a really good technique when only 10% of the market was doing it. But what happens when like the vast majority of the market is literally just blindly buying index funds with every single paycheck without looking at the price of the stock, and not saying like, is it too expensive? Is it not? They're just buying the basket. Well, there's a bunch of interesting feedback loops that happen. Like one is, the biggest cap companies like Apple. The way these index funds work is, I don't know what percent of the S&P 500 Apple is. Let's say it's like 7% or 10% or it's some big number. When you buy that index fund, 7% of your money goes to basically buying Apple stock. So and then Apple stock, because of that buy pressure, goes up even more. And then you're like, wow, it's working. Let me invest more money. And then you're buying even more Apple stock the next time you buy. And so, in my view, public markets are kind of have this radical distortion right now with very irrational behavior where a huge number of people are just hitting buy, pushing prices up of certain stocks, while the smaller caps are not seeing that same buy pressure necessarily. Or if you're not listed in the S&P 500, you're not seeing any of that upside at all. And so, that's the, I guess, more esoteric point is like, I think public markets are behaving very weirdly and very irrationally. Michael Burry from like The Big Short, he wrote this like very long article on Seeking Alpha about basically saying, for every dollar that gets invested into an index fund, it creates $5 of buying pressure because of these feedback loops. Anyway, so that's been esoteric, a slightly more esoteric rabbit hole. The other, okay, so let me answer more directly from like the legal tech standpoint. I think, so I used to, before I started Spellbook, actually, I've traded stocks independently for a long time. I've managed my own active portfolio since I was in high school. My first 10 years of trading were like neutral, not very successful. And then, I read 0 to 1. That book really kind of helped me figure something out about how to invest
sitting on my desk right across. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. I mean, that book, to be honest, changed my life. Like it changed how I think about investing. It changed how I thought about businesses. And, one of the things I learned is like trading on the news really doesn't work. Like you will lose a lot of money if you trade based on news headlines because, one, everyone else has that same information. It's very reactive. And it tends to be overstated. It tends to oversimplify. When you think about why companies do good or why they do bad, it's not usually due to like one news headline or one story. There's this huge variety of factors that goes into, whether a stock is overpriced or underpriced. And, I think these headlines tend to be really overstated. And like the example I'll give in this case is I was the first one on our team to use the new Claude plugin for contract review. And, it's very cool. We love Anthropic. They're an amazing partner of ours. But the output you get is basically very similar to what you might get from like ChatGPT Pro. It's like, it's a text file. It's like, oh, I looked at the contract and here's some things you should look at, and it's just a plugin. Like they launched maybe like 30, 40, I don't know, 50 of these like little plugins to show the power of their plugin system of like different things you can do with it. The idea of their plugin system is like, oh, you can create your own skills for Claude and it can, do different things. But, ChatGPT launched custom GPTs 2 years ago in January 2024. if you go to custom GPTs in ChatGPT and you search contract review, you will find hundreds of contract review plugins or contract review custom GPTs on ChatGPT already. This already happened in my view. We already have, these sort of like little plugins for generalized AI that help you do specific tasks. But they didn't really succeed that much because at the end of the day, it's just a slight help. It slightly helps you prompt and work with tools a little bit better in these generalized AI environments. But when people use Spellbook, they're not just using like a chat environment. Like we have very purpose-built toaster-like UI for the purpose of contract review, where we're providing you suggestions or
the difference between a use case and a product.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's a use case of their product and helps you prompt a little bit better. And so did OpenAI's custom GPTs when they launched them 2 years ago. Like people launched contract review on custom GPT 2 years ago. It didn't, and the market didn't freak out about that. I think it's very different than like a holistic platform and user experience that is fully built for this. And I think one of the big differences is just, it's not just chat, there's only so much you can do in this chat window. It's amazing. I use Claude and ChatGPT all the time, but it's not the perfect environment for like redlining Word documents and, accepting changes and, comparing, how this commercial lease looks compared to the average commercial lease. It's not, I don't think, chat is the be all and end all of AI user experiences. I think we are going to see a lot more of these purpose-built UIs come out. And
I think
chat, I don't think Anthropic's going to do that. Yeah, like I think Anthropic's going to build.
I think chat is like an amazing user interface for a generalist application, where the idea is like the sky's the limit. The opportunities are like only as limited as your imagination. And there's an awesome place for a product like that, I think, in a lot of people's lives. And if you're a creative person, then like these tools are like they're so delightful. But you don't like that the creativity that you might have in those circumstances is not necessarily what you want when you're like reviewing a contract in order to like send it to a client. That's a different behavior, and it's not necessarily like the chat interface that you want. And again, I always loved the Dharmesh Shah, like from founder of HubSpot. Yeah. He talks about this a lot, that like software will move away from pointing and clicking to like, what do you want? And so I think he's right when you're talking about the generalist applications. And I think he's right if you're in a software that was built 10 years ago and it's like really hard to work it. So like if you don't have like a Walk Me subscription to make it easier or something like that, then like having an AI to be like, hey, can I just get like a report? Can I get like the data on this? That is probably, pretty useful. But I think when you're talking about products that have been designed like with AI in mind from the ground up, it's very clear to me that like the user interface and the user experience and the amount of delight that it produces is not best when it is like just like an open canvas. Like an open canvas has its place, but not for that use case.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think certain things, what do you want works really well. But I mean, there's a ton of areas where it doesn't. I think, humans want an intuitive understanding of the information that's being displayed to them, and they want to be able to manipulate it in an intuitive way. One example is just like, think of a calendar. I have my calendar in the background just to make sure I'm, on time for my next meeting. And,
right.
Like, I don't want to type like, hey, am I on time for my next meeting, while I'm talking to you, like I can just see, okay, I got, 12 minutes or whatever. And if I'm trying to like say schedule a vacation, I don't want to be like, hey, look at my calendar and find me the best place to put a vacation. No, I actually want a visual. I want a visual of like, show me my weeks, and I scroll through the calendar and be like, maybe I can move this here and move that there. I think it's just humans are visual. They want interfaces have to give us this intuitive way to kind of grasp and tweak what we're working on. You can go even deeper in like something like Figma, like you're working on design, like, yeah, you can prompt to get a design out for a piece of software, but you're going to want to tweak it and nudge a thing here, or put a button there. And, I think that's very difficult to do with like text alone. I think humans want to get their hands on things and tweak them.
Scott, amazing catching up. I look forward to our next our next conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me, Zach.